The transport ship made a low humming sound as it approached the massive space station. Captain Hyunwoo pressed his face against the small window and watched Nexus Prime grow larger. The station was bigger than any city he had ever seen. It looked like a giant metal flower floating in space with long arms reaching out in all directions. "First time seeing it?" asked the pilot from the front of the ship. "Yes," Hyunwoo replied. "Hard to believe humans built part of this." The pilot laughed. "Humans didn't build much of it, we just got invited to the party." Hyunwoo nodded. That was true. Humanity had only joined the Galactic Coalition 5 years ago. They were still the new kids trying to prove they belonged. Today would be another test. Today, the first human would try to join the Galactic Peacekeepers. The docking bay was enormous. Ships from dozens of different worlds sat in neat rows. Some looked like sleek silver fish. Others looked like floating crystals. A few didn't look like ships at all, but more like living creatures made of metal and light. Hyun-Woo walked through the station corridors. The ceiling was so high he could barely see the top. Aliens of every shape and size moved past him. Some walked on legs like humans. Others floated in the air. A few rolled along the ground like living boulders. He had studied all the major species, but seeing them in person was different. The Veltari looked like walking diamonds that threw off rainbow light as they moved. The Kethmore had 6 arms and moved like giant insects. The Nulvex were just colored gas floating inside clear suits. Each group carried weapons that made human technology look like stone tools. Energy rifles that could cut through starship hulls. Force shields that could stop meteors. Devices that could change the shape of matter itself. Hyun-Woo found the recruitment center and showed his identification to the guard. The guard was a Veltari whose body sparkled blue and green. "Captain Hyunwoo of the Terran Diplomatic Corps," the guard read from a screen. "Here to observe the human recruit. She is already inside." The main hall was packed with beings from across the galaxy. At the center stood a raised platform where new recruits were being presented. Hyunwoo found a spot where he could see clearly and waited. A tall Veltari in a military uniform stepped onto the platform. His crystal body was deep red and gold. When he spoke, his voice came through speakers around the room. "Welcome to another recruitment day for the Galactic Peacekeepers. Today we will see candidates from 12 different worlds. Each brings the best their species has to offer." The first candidate was introduced. A Kethmore warrior stepped forward carrying a weapon that looked like it was made of pure energy. The creature was twice as tall as a human and covered in armor that seemed to move like liquid metal. Warrior Jaewon of the Kethmore represents his species' mastery of plasma technology, the announcer said. His weapon can destroy a building with a single shot. The crowd made impressed sounds. The Kethmore demonstrated by firing at a target across the room. The beam of energy hit the metal target and turned it into glowing dust in seconds. Next came a Nulvex in a floating suit. The gas inside the suit swirled in patterns of purple and gold. Technician Dong-min of the Nulvex brings molecular disruption technology. He can break apart matter at the atomic level. The Nulvex pointed a device at another target. The metal target simply fell apart like it was made of sand. The crowd was even more impressed. One by one, each species showed off their most advanced weapons and technology. Energy shields that could stop anything. Devices that could control gravity. Weapons that could fire through solid walls. Finally, the announcer called the last name. Corporal Ji Young of Terra. Hyunwoo held his breath as a human woman walked onto the platform. She looked small compared to the other candidates. She wore simple military clothes and carried only a basic field pack. No weapons, no armor, no advanced technology at all. The crowd went quiet. Some of the aliens leaned forward to get a better look. Others whispered to each other in languages Hyunwoo didn't understand. The Veltari announcer seemed confused. He looked at his notes and then at Ji Young. "Corporal, where is your equipment, your weapons, your demonstration?" Ji Young stood straight and spoke in a clear voice. "I don't need them, sir." A wave of whispers went through the crowd. The other candidates on the platform looked at each other with expressions that seemed puzzled even across species lines. A Kethmore commander stepped forward from the crowd. His 6 arms moved as he talked. Human, this is the Galactic Peacekeepers. We fight the most dangerous enemies in the galaxy. We protect entire worlds. How can you do this with no weapons? No enhancement suits? Added a Veltari from the crowd. Her crystal body flashed bright yellow. No neural amplifiers? Asked a Nulvex. The gas inside his suit turned dark red. G-Young looked around the room at all the advanced technology and powerful weapons. She seemed to think for a moment. Then, she smiled. I understand your confusion, she said. Your species have built amazing tools. Your technology is far beyond anything humans have created. But you're asking the wrong question. What do you mean? The Kethmore commander asked. You're asking what weapons I carry. But weapons don't win battles. Warriors do. You can give the best weapon in the galaxy to a coward and they will still lose. You can take every tool away from a true warrior and they will still find a way to win. The room was completely silent now. Every being was focused on the small human standing alone on the platform. I am not here to show you advanced technology, Ji-Young continued. I am here to show you what my species brings to the peacekeepers. We bring the one thing that no technology can replace. We bring the human spirit. An older Veltari near the front of the crowd spoke up. His crystal body was pale white with age. Pretty words, human. But how do you fight energy beings that can absorb any weapon? How do you defeat enemies that can manipulate space and time? How do you protect innocent people when you have nothing but spirit? Ji-Young's smile grew wider. The same way humans have always won battles, by being more stubborn than our enemies, by refusing to give up, by adapting to any situation and turning our weaknesses into strengths. She pointed to her head. This is my weapon, my ability to think and learn and change. Give me any problem, and I will find a solution. Put me against any enemy and I will find their weakness. Send me to protect people and I will find a way to save them. The announcer looked uncertain. But the trials require actual demonstrations of combat ability. Then, let's begin, Ji-Young said simply. I'm ready. The crowd began talking excitedly among themselves. Some seemed interested. Others appeared doubtful. A few looked like they thought the human had lost her mind. Hyun-Woo felt pride swelling in his chest. This was why humanity deserved a place among the stars. Not because they had the best weapons or the most advanced technology, but because they had something that couldn't be built or programmed or bought. They had the will to never surrender. The trials would begin tomorrow. The galaxy would learn what it meant to fight like a human. The next morning came too quickly for most of the recruits. Ji-Young woke up in her small room and did her usual morning exercises. Push-ups, sit-ups, and stretches. Simple human movements that kept her body ready for anything. Down the hall, she could hear the other candidates preparing their equipment, the sound of energy weapons charging, the hum of force field generators, the beeping of computer systems running diagnostics. Ji-Young picked up her field pack and walked to the door. Inside the pack was a water bottle, some food bars, a first aid kit, and a few basic tools. Nothing that would impress anyone at a technology fair. The training facility was enormous. It looked like a small city built inside the space station. Buildings, streets, parks, and even artificial weather systems. But Ji-Young knew it was all fake. This was Training Facility Alpha 7, the most advanced combat simulation in the galaxy. Commander Dong-Hyun of the Kethmore stood at the entrance. His 6 arms moved constantly as he checked data on multiple screens at once. His insect-like face showed no emotion, but his voice carried authority. Today's test is survival, he announced to the group of recruits. You will enter a simulation of the death world Kalar 9. The environment will try to kill you. The creatures will try to eat you. The terrain will try to trap you. Your job is to reach the extraction point on the other side of the testing area. He pointed one of his arms at a large display screen. It showed a map of deadly terrain. Acid swamps, lava fields, frozen wastelands, and deep canyons filled with dangerous creatures. You have 6 hours. Failure to reach extraction means failure of the test. Death in the simulation means serious injury in real life. The safety systems will protect you from actual death, but you will feel pain. A Veltari recruit raised her crystal hand. Commander, are we allowed to work together? Negative. This is an individual test. Each recruit enters alone and must survive alone. Ji Young looked at the other candidates. They were all checking their equipment one more time. Energy shields, plasma weapons, environmental suits, flying devices, and computer systems that could analyze any threat. Recruit Ji Young, Commander Dong Hyun called out. You will go first. Several of the alien recruits made sounds that might have been laughter in their languages. One Kethmore clicked his mandibles together in what was clearly amusement. The human with no weapons goes first, he said to his neighbor. This will be over quickly. Ji Young walked to the entrance of the simulation chamber. The door was a shimmering wall of energy that looked like water made of light. Any final equipment requests? Commander Dong Hyun asked. No, sir. I'm ready. The Kethmore commander looked at her for a long moment. Then he gestured with two of his arms. Begin simulation. Difficulty level. Standard peacekeeper trial. Ji Young stepped through the energy wall and found herself in hell. The air was thick and hot. Poisonous gas drifted in green clouds across a landscape that looked like a nightmare. Twisted metal trees reached up toward a red sky. In the distance, she could see the acid swamps Commander Dong Hyun had mentioned behind her. The extraction point was 6 hours away through terrain designed to kill Dot. Most recruits would immediately activate their environmental suits and energy shields. They would use their sensors to map the safest route and their weapons to clear any obstacles. Ji Young took a deep breath of the poisonous air and started walking. The first challenge came within minutes. A pack of creatures that looked like metal wolves with acid dripping from their teeth. They moved between the twisted trees, hunting for prey. Ji Young crouched behind a fallen log and watched them. She noticed they moved in patterns. Hunt for 2 minutes, then rest for 1. During their rest period, they all faced the same direction, away from the wind. When the next rest period came, Ji Young moved. She stayed low and kept the wind at her back so her scent wouldn't reach them. She passed within 10 feet of the deadly creatures, but they never saw her. In the observation room, Commander Dong Hyun's mandibles clicked together in surprise. Interesting. She avoided combat entirely. Lucky, said the Veltari instructor, Sujin. Her crystal body flashed orange with doubt. Wait until she reaches the acid swamps. Luck won't help her there. The acid swamps were worse than they looked. The green liquid bubbled and steamed. Any living thing that touched it would dissolve in seconds. Floating platforms provided the only safe path across, but they moved constantly, making jumping between them nearly impossible. Most recruits used their flying equipment to soar over the danger. Others used energy bridges to connect the platforms. Ji Young sat on the edge of the swamp and watched the platforms move. She watched for 10 minutes, timing their movements. Gradually, she began to see the pattern. The platforms moved in a cycle that repeated every 3 minutes. When the cycle started again, she began jumping. Platform to platform, following the rhythm she had memorized. Twice, she had to hang from the edge of a platform when her timing was off. Once she had to jump further than seemed possible. But she made it across without any equipment except her own body and brain. How did she know the pattern? Sujin asked. Her crystal body was now flashing yellow with confusion. Humans observe, Commander Dong Hyun replied. Apparently better than we expected. The next challenge was a maze of ice caves filled with creatures that hunted by detecting heat. Their bodies were like living ice, but their teeth could bite through metal. Ji Young found the entrance to the caves and saw the problem immediately. Her body heat would make her easy prey. But she also noticed something else. Water was dripping from the cave ceiling and freezing into ice formations. She took off her jacket and soaked it in the freezing water. Then she put it back on. The cold water made her body temperature drop enough to confuse the creature's heat sensors. Moving through the ice caves was miserable. The wet, freezing jacket made her shake with cold. But the ice creatures couldn't find her. They passed within inches of her hiding spots but never detected her presence. Finally, she reached the last challenge. A massive combat drone guarded the path to the extraction point. The machine was 10 feet tall and armed with weapons that could destroy a small building. Other recruits would attack it directly with their energy weapons. They would use their shields to block its attacks and their superior firepower to destroy it. Young hid behind a rock and studied the machine. It had heavy armor on the front and sides. But on the back, she could see cooling vents that glowed with heat. The drone was so powerful that it needed constant cooling to prevent overheating. She gathered small rocks and pieces of debris from around the canyon. When the drone turned away from her, she threw the debris at the cooling vents. Most of her throws missed, but some hit their target. The drone spun around looking for the source of the attack, but Young was already hidden again. She kept throwing debris, aiming only for the cooling vents. After 10 minutes of this, the drone began to slow down. Its movements became jerky. Warning lights flashed on its surface. Finally, it stopped moving entirely and powered down to prevent damage to its systems. Young walked past the disabled machine and reached the extraction point with an hour to spare. In the observation room, absolute silence filled the space. Instructors from a dozen different species stared at the screen showing Young's successful completion. "She had no weapons," whispered a Nulvex instructor. The gas inside his suit swirled with patterns of amazement. "She had no shields," added a Veltari. "She had no sensors, no computers, no advanced technology of any kind," Commander Dong-hyun said slowly. His 6 arms had stopped moving for the first time anyone could remember. When Young emerged from the simulation chamber, she was tired, cold, and dirty. But she was smiling. "How?" Sujin asked. Her crystal body was flashing every color at once. "How did you complete a course designed for technologically advanced warriors?" Young wiped sweat and ice water from her face. "I watched. I learned. I adapted." She looked at all the advanced equipment the other recruits carried. "Your tools are impressive, but they make you think in only one way. You try to overpower every problem. Sometimes the solution isn't to fight harder. Sometimes it's to fight smarter." The other recruits were called for their turns, but everyone was talking about the human who had completed the impossible trial with nothing but her mind and body. Commander Dong-hyun made a note in his report. "Recommend immediate advancement to Phase 2 trials." In space, Captain Hyunwoo received a message on his communication device. He read it twice, then smiled. Humanity was going to surprise the galaxy in ways no one expected. The Academy classroom was unlike anything on Earth. The ceiling showed real stars moving slowly overhead. The walls could display any battlefield from galactic history. Today they showed the Battle of Zerion Prime, where the Veltari had defeated an invasion using precise energy strikes. Professor Won-sik stood at the front of the room. He was old even for a Veltari, and his crystal body had turned almost white with age. His voice carried the wisdom of someone who had studied war for 300 years. "War is mathematics," he told the class of recruits. "You calculate your enemy's strength. You measure your own resources. You apply the correct amount of force to achieve victory." The alien students nodded. This made sense to them. The Kethmore calculated firepower ratios. The Veltari computed energy efficiency. The Nulvex analyzed molecular probabilities. Young sat in the back row and said nothing. "Each species has developed military doctrine based on their natural strengths," Professor Won-sik continued. "The Kethmore doctrine is overwhelming force. Hit the enemy with more firepower than they can handle. Simple and effective." A Kethmore student named Minho clicked his mandibles in agreement. His 6 arms gestured as he spoke. "Why make war complicated? Find enemy. Apply superior weapons. Win battle." "The Veltari prefer precision," the professor said. "The wall display changed to show energy beams cutting through enemy ships with surgical accuracy. We calculate the exact amount of force needed. No waste, no excess, perfect efficiency." A Veltari student named Yoon-jung flashed blue light in approval. "Mathematics never lies. If you know all variables, you can predict any outcome." "The Nulvex excel at environmental warfare," Professor Won-sik added. The display showed gas clouds reshaping entire battlefields. They changed the battlefield itself to favor their abilities. Now the professor turned his attention to Ji Young. "And what of human military doctrine, Corporal? What is your species' approach to warfare?" All eyes in the classroom focused on the human. Ji Young stood up slowly. "We adapt," she said simply. Dot. The professor's crystal body flickered with confusion. "That is not a doctrine. That is not a strategy. How do you plan battles? How do you calculate victory?" "We don't," Ji Young replied. "Every battle is different. Every enemy is different. So we become whatever we need to become." Minho the Kethmore made a sound like clicking laughter. "That makes no sense. How can you build weapons without knowing how you will fight? How can you train soldiers without standard tactics?" added Yunjung, the Vel quote. Tari.G-. Young walked to the front of the classroom. "Professor, may I access the historical database?" "Professor," Wonsik gestured with one crystalline arm. The wall display changed to show a menu of historical battles. "Show me human conflicts," Ji Young said to the computer system. The display filled with images of Earth battles spanning thousands of years. Ancient armies with bronze spears, medieval knights on horses, modern soldiers with rifles. "Look at this. Battle," Ji Young said, pointing to one image. "Farmers with simple tools defeated professional soldiers with advanced weapons. How?" The alien students stared at the display. It showed poorly equipped humans defeating a much stronger enemy. "They used the terrain," Ji Young explained. "They fought in forests where heavy cavalry couldn't charge. They used hit-and-run tactics instead of standing in formation. They turned their weakness into strength." She pointed to another battle. "Here, a small human force held a mountain pass against an army 50 times larger. They didn't win by being stronger, they won by choosing where to fight." More images appeared. Humans winning battles they should have lost, defeating enemies with better weapons, more soldiers, superior technology. "You see patterns?" Professor Wonsik asked. His voice carried genuine curiosity now. "The pattern is that there is no pattern," Ji Young said. "Each time humans looked at the situation and became what they needed to be. Sometimes we were patient. Sometimes we were aggressive. Sometimes we hid. Sometimes we charged into battle screaming." She turned to face the class of alien recruits. "Your species are specialists. You do one thing very well. Humans are generalists. We do many things adequately well. But more importantly, we change based on what the situation requires." A Nulvex student named Kyung Soo spoke up. His gas patterns swirled with skepticism. "But without advanced technology, how do you defeat superior enemies? How do humans fight against species with energy weapons and force shields?" "The same way we always have," Ji Young replied. "By not fighting their fight. By making them fight. Our fight instead." Professor Wonsik activated a new simulation. It appeared in the center of the classroom as a three-dimensional battlefield. "Very well," he said. "Demonstrate this adaptability. You are defending this position against overwhelming odds. Standard doctrine says you should use the defensive, barriers and energy weapons to hold your ground." The simulation showed a fortified position on high ground. Energy barriers provided excellent cover. Weapon emplacements covered all approaches. It was a perfect defensive setup. The enemy force in the simulation was 3 times larger and had superior firepower. According to all military mathematics, the defender would lose. G. Young studied the battlefield for several minutes. The other students expected her to explain how to use the defensive weapons more effectively. Instead, she did something that shocked everyone. "I abandoned the position," she announced. The classroom erupted in confused voices. Professor Wonsik raised one arm for silence. "Explain," he said simply. "This position is strong, but it's also a trap," Ji Young said. "The enemy expects me to defend here. They have planned their attack based on my defending here. But what if I'm not here when they arrive?" She manipulated the simulation controls. The defensive position was left empty while the defending force moved to a narrow canyon nearby. Now the enemy arrives expecting a defensive battle. Instead, they find nothing. They have to come looking for me. When they enter this canyon, their superior numbers become a disadvantage. They can't spread out. They can't use their heavy weapons effectively. They have to fight on my terms. The simulation played out. The larger enemy force entered the canyon, in a long column. The smaller defending force attacked from the sides and above. The battle that should have been impossible to win became a victory. The classroom was silent for a long moment. Impressive, Professor Wansick finally said. But this is still just one battle, one situation. Exactly, Ji Young replied. Give me a different situation and I'll find a different solution. That's what humans do. We don't follow doctrine. We create new doctrine for each battle. Over the next hour, Professor Wansick presented increasingly difficult scenarios. Each time, Ji Young found a solution that none of the other students had considered. Fighting superior technology? Use terrain to make technology ineffective. Outnumbered by faster enemies? Force them to fight in confined spaces. Facing enemies with energy shields? Use the environment itself as a weapon. With each demonstration, the alien students began to understand something new. There was more to warfare than advanced weapons and calculated strategies. Professor, Yunjung the Veltari said quietly, if humans can adapt to any situation, how does anyone defeat them? Professor Wansick looked at Ji Young. An excellent question. How does one defeat an enemy that constantly changes? Ji Young smiled sadly. You don't defeat us in battle. You defeat us by making us give up hope. Humans can adapt to any situation except one where we believe there is no point in fighting. And how often does that happen? Minho the Kethmore asked. Not often, Ji Young replied. We're very stubborn. As the class ended, students from different species approached Ji Young with questions. They wanted to understand this strange human way of thinking that turned weakness into strength. Professor Wansick made a note in his personal files. Recommend advanced tactical training for Corporal Ji Young. Also recommend that other students observe human methods. There may be lessons here for all species. That evening, Ji Young sat alone in her room and thought about the day. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new tests that she would have to adapt to and overcome. She smiled. For the first time since arriving at the academy, she felt like she was teaching the galaxy something important. Something about what it meant to be human. The emergency alarm woke everyone at the academy. Red lights flashed in every corridor. The voice that came through the speakers was urgent and worried. All students and instructors report to the main briefing hall immediately. This is not a drill. Repeat, this is not a drill. Ji Young pulled on her uniform and ran through the halls along with hundreds of other beings. She had never seen the aliens look scared before, but today many of them showed clear signs of fear. The briefing hall was packed. Commander Dong Hyun stood on the main platform, his 6 arms moving rapidly as he worked multiple computer screens. Behind him, the large display showed star charts and battle reports. 3 hours ago, we lost contact with the colony world Tau 9, the Kethmore commander announced. Initial reports suggested equipment failure. We now know the truth is much worse. The display changed to show images from the colony, or what was left of it. Buildings that once housed millions of people were now empty shells. Advanced defense systems lay in ruins. Nothing moved in the silent streets. The colony was attacked by an unknown species calling themselves the Vorthak. Commander Dong Hyun continued. They appear to be energy-based life forms unlike anything in our databases. A voice from the crowd called out. What happened to the colonists? We don't know. We have found no bodies, no signs of struggle, no indication of where 8 million beings have gone. The display showed recordings from the colony's final hours. Dark shapes moved through the streets like living shadows. When they touched the colony's energy shields, the barriers simply disappeared. When they encountered weapons fire, the energy beams made the creatures grow larger and stronger. All conventional weapons appear to be useless, Commander Dong Hyun said. Energy weapons, Plasma cannons, particle beams all have the same effect. They make the Vorthak more powerful. An old Veltari instructor stood up. What about kinetic weapons, physical projectiles? Also ineffective. The creatures seem to exist partially outside normal space. Physical matter passes through them without causing damage. Ji Young felt a chill that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. An enemy that couldn't be hurt by energy weapons or physical attacks. An enemy that grew stronger when you tried to fight it. Captain Yoon-hee of the Terran Diplomatic Corps stood up in the crowd. Ji Young was surprised to see her. The captain was supposed to be on Earth for meetings. Commander, I volunteer Corporal Ji Young for the rescue mission, Captain Yoon-hee announced. The hall erupted in shocked voices. A Kethmore instructor shouted over the noise. The human is still in training. How can she succeed where advanced civilizations have failed? Because, Captain Yoon-hee replied calmly, sometimes the solution to an impossible problem requires impossible thinking. Commander, Dong-hyun looked at Ji Young. Corporal, this is not an academy exercise. These creatures have destroyed an entire colonial defense fleet. Are you prepared for real combat? Ji Young stood up. Every being in the hall was looking at her. She could feel their doubt and fear. Yes, sir, she said simply. The flight to Tau 9 took 18 hours. Ji Young spent the time studying every piece of data about the Vorthak. The other members of the rescue team did the same, but they focused on the creature's abilities and weapons. G-. Young focused on something different. She looked at where the creatures went and where they didn't go. The team leader was Commander Taemin, a Veltari with extensive combat experience. His crystal body glowed with confidence even in the face of the unknown enemy. Our mission is reconnaissance, he briefed the team. We need to learn how to fight these creatures. We are not expected to engage in major combat. The team included specialists from 5 different species. Each carried the most advanced weapons their civilization could provide. Energy rifles that could punch through starship armor, shield generators that could stop asteroids, computer systems that could analyze any threat in seconds. G. Young carried her standard field pack, and nothing else. When they arrived at Tau 9, the site was worse than the recordings had shown. The colony had been built to house 8 million beings. Now it was a ghost town that stretched as far as the eye could see. The team's ship landed at the main spaceport. The landing pad that should have been busy with traffic was completely empty. Not even any abandoned vehicles. Energy readings are strange, reported the team's Nulvec scientist Woo Jin. There are power sources throughout the colony, but they're not connected to anything. Life sign readings are negative, added the Kethmore warrior Bora. But there are mass readings that don't match the colonial database. Commander Taemin activated his personal shield and checked his energy rifle. We investigate in standard formation. Stay alert for any sign of the Vorthak. They moved through the empty streets in a tight group. The colony had been beautiful, once. Parks and gardens between the residential areas. Art installations that mixed styles from dozens of different worlds. Now everything was covered in a strange gray dust that seemed to absorb light. This dust, Ji Young said, kneeling to examine it. It wasn't in the original reports. Woo Jin floated over to scan the substance. Interesting. It appears to be some form of organic matter but broken down to the molecular level. Could this be what happened to the colonists? Bora asked. The question hung in the air like a curse. 8 million beings turned to dust. They reached the colony's central command center. The building was intact, but all the energy systems were dead. Emergency. Lighting flickered weakly in the corridors. In the main control room, they found the first signs of what had happened. Computer logs from the final hours of the colony. The attack began at the outer defensive perimeter. Commander Taemin read from the logs. Energy barriers failed on first contact with unknown entities. Plasma cannons reported direct hits with no effect on targets. The logs showed the colony's desperate attempts to fight back. More powerful weapons. Concentrated fire from multiple sources. Even desperate attempts to overload their own power systems to create massive energy bursts. Nothing worked. Every attack made the Vorthak stronger. Sir, Ji Young said quietly, I want to check the agricultural sectors. Why? Commander Tai Min asked. The Vorthak have been through the entire colony. Maybe, Ji Young replied. But I noticed something in the orbital scans. The agricultural areas showed different energy patterns than the rest of the colony. They made their way to the farming districts on the outskirts of the colony. These areas used less advanced technology. Simple greenhouses, basic irrigation systems, minimal power usage. And here, for the first time, they found signs of life. Hidden in underground storage cellars. They discovered survivors. Not many, maybe a few hundred out of 8 million. But they were alive. The survivors were terrified and traumatized. But they could speak. An elderly human colonist named Kyung Ho seemed to be their leader. They came like shadows, he whispered, moving through the streets, touching everything. When they touched the energy shields, the barriers just disappeared. When they touched people, he couldn't finish the sentence. How did you survive? Commander Tai Min asked gently. We hid in places with no power, Kyung Ho explained. Old, root cellars, natural caves, anywhere without energy signatures. They seemed to avoid those areas. Ji Young knelt down beside the old man. Did you notice anything else about them? Anything that might help us understand them? Kyung Ho thought for a moment. They weren't just absorbing energy. They were drawn to it, like moths to a flame. The bigger the energy source, the more of them would gather around it. But they could touch organic matter directly? Ji Young asked. No, Kyung Ho said with certainty. They couldn't touch living things directly. They needed the energy field around technology to interact with our reality. Without that connection, they couldn't affect us. Ji Young felt pieces of a puzzle clicking together in her mind. The Vorthak weren't just immune to technology. They were dependent on it. Commander, she said urgently, we need to get back to the ship. I think I understand what we're dealing with. As they prepared to leave, Ji Young took one more look around the empty colony. Somewhere out there, the Vorthak were still hunting, still growing stronger with every energy weapon fired at them. But now she knew their weakness. She just had to convince an entire galactic civilization to fight the most dangerous enemy they had ever encountered with the simplest tools imaginable. No advanced technology. No energy weapons. No shields or computers or any of the things that made them feel safe. Just the basic tools and tactics that thinking beings had used since the dawn of warfare. The flight back to the academy was going to be very interesting. The emergency council meeting was the largest gathering of military leaders in galactic history. Representatives from every major species filled the great hall at Nexus Prime. The air hummed with tension and the glow of dozens of different life forms. Admiral Sujin of the Veltari High Command stood at the center podium. Her ancient crystal body flickered with stress patterns as she addressed the assembly. The situation at Tau Nin is worse than we initially reported, she began. Long range, scans show the Vorthak are not just occupying the colony, they are spreading. The main display showed star charts with growing red zones. Each red area represented a system that had gone silent in the past 24 hours. 3 more colonies have lost contact, Admiral Sujin continued. The pattern is the same. Complete technological failure followed by total silence. A Kethmore general rose from his seat. Admiral, we have assembled the largest battle fleet in history. Surely concentrated firepower can succeed where individual colonies failed. General Minsik, our preliminary engagements suggest otherwise. Every energy weapon we use makes the Vorthak stronger. Every shield we activate gives them more power to absorb. The hall filled with worried voices in dozens of languages. These were beings accustomed to solving problems with advanced technology and superior firepower. Facing an enemy that grew stronger from both was beyond their understanding. There is one other matter, Admiral Sujin said. The hall quieted. Corporal Ji Young of Terra has returned from Tau 9 with a proposed strategy. The reaction was immediate. Clicks, flashes, and gas swirls of disbelief filled the air. A human trainee? General Minsik's mandibles clicked with indignation. What could she possibly know that our greatest tactical minds do not? Commander. Dong-hyun stepped onto the platform. Respectfully, General, the human has demonstrated abilities that our tactical minds lack. I recommend we hear her proposal. Admiral Soo-jin nodded. Corporal Ji-young, present your analysis. Ji-young walked to the center of the Great Hall. Around her sat beings whose civilizations were thousands of years older than humanity. Beings with weapons that could destroy planets and minds that could calculate faster than any human computer. She felt very small and very young. The Vorthak are not what we think they are, she began. We see them as energy-absorbing creatures that are immune to our weapons, but that's not accurate. She activated the hall's display system. Images from Town 9 appeared above the assembly. The Vorthak don't just absorb energy, they require it to exist in our reality. They are beings from another dimension who can only interact with our physical universe through technological energy fields. General Minsik interrupted. If they need our energy, how is that a weakness? Because without our energy, they cannot touch us, Ji-young replied. The survivors at Town 9 were hiding in areas with no technology. The Vorthak couldn't affect them there. A Nulvex admiral named Dong-soo spoke up. You are suggesting we fight energy beings without using energy? That is impossible. Not impossible, Ji-young said firmly. Difficult, but not impossible. She changed the display to show ancient human battles. Warriors with metal swords and wooden shields. Soldiers with simple projectile weapons. For most of our history, humans fought without energy weapons or advanced technology. We used kinetic force, chemical reactions, and simple mechanical principles. Those are primitive methods, General Minsik protested, useless against advanced enemies. Are they? Ji-young asked. She showed footage from the Town 9 investigation. When I threw rocks at a Vorthak creature, what happened? The footage showed her experiment. Simple stones passing through the shadow-like being without effect. The rocks passed through because there was no energy field for the Vorthak to interact with. But what if we change that? She explained her theory. The Vorthak existed partially in normal space and partially in their own dimension. They needed energy fields to fully manifest and affect physical matter. Without those fields, they were essentially ghosts. So we fight them as ghosts, she concluded. We use weapons and tools that don't generate energy fields they can absorb. Simple kinetic weapons. Basic mechanical devices, chemical reactions instead of energy beams. The hall erupted in arguments. The idea of abandoning advanced technology to fight with primitive weapons seemed absurd to beings who had mastered space travel and energy manipulation. Admiral Soo-jin called for order. The Council will consider your proposal, Corporal. But implementing such a strategy across multiple fleets would require extensive preparation. We don't have time for extensive preparation, Ji-young said urgently. The Vorthak are spreading faster than our reports can track them. By the time we organize a conventional response, they may have consumed entire sectors. Commander Dong-hyun stepped forward. I propose a test, a single-ship mission using the humans' methods. If it succeeds, we implement the strategy fleet-wide. And if it fails, General Minsik asked. Then we try conventional warfare and hope for the best, Admiral Soo-jin replied. The vote was close, but Ji-young's proposal was approved for testing. She would lead a small team back to Town 9 using only non-energy weapons and basic technology. The preparation was unlike anything the galactic military had ever attempted. Weapons specialists worked frantically to create kinetic projectile launchers. Engineers designed mechanical tools that operated without electronic components. Scientists developed chemical compounds that could function without energy fields. The most difficult part was convincing the team members to abandon their advanced equipment. Commander Tae-min stared at the simple metal projectile rifle he had been given. This weapon is thousands of years obsolete. It fires small metal slugs using chemical propulsion. Yes, sir, Ji-young replied, and the Vorthak will have no way to absorb or deflect those slugs. Bo-Ra, the Kethmore warrior, examined her new equipment with all 6 arms. Instead of her plasma weapons, she carried mechanical crossbows and chemical explosives. These tools are so primitive. How can we fight advanced enemies with such basic weapons? The same way humans have always fought, Ji-young said. By being more stubborn than our enemies. The ship that carried them back to Tau 9 was also modified. No energy shields, no plasma drives, no computer-guided systems. Just mechanical controls, chemical rockets, and basic metal hull plating. It felt like traveling backward through time. When they reached Tau 9, the colony was no longer empty. The Vorthak had multiplied. Dark shapes moved through the streets, like living smoke. Some were as small as humans. Others towered over the abandoned buildings. Energy readings are off the scale, reported Wu Jin the Nullvex, using a mechanical scanner instead of his usual electronic equipment. They are drawing power from every remaining system in the colony. Landing zones? Commander Taman asked. The main spaceport is swarming with them, Ji Young replied, using simple optical telescopes to observe the surface. But the agricultural areas are still mostly clear. They landed in a field outside the farming district. The ship's chemical. Rockets made a lot of noise and smoke but produced no energy signatures for the Vorthak to detect. As they prepared to disembark, Ji Young felt the weight of what they were attempting. An entire civilization was depending on this mission. If her theory was wrong, billions of beings would die. Remember, she told the team, we are not trying to fight like our usual selves. We are fighting like humans have always fought. With determination, creativity, and the refusal to give up. Commander Taman checked his mechanical projectile weapon one more time. I still think this is insane. Probably, Ji Young agreed, but sometimes insane is exactly what the situation requires. They stepped out of the ship and began walking toward the colony. Behind them, the sun was setting. Ahead of them, the Vorthak waited in the growing darkness. It was time to discover if humanity's oldest weapons could defeat the galaxy's newest enemy. The first Vorthak they encountered was the size of a building. It drifted through the colony's main street like a living shadow, absorbing power from the few remaining energy sources. The creature was magnificent and terrifying, a being of pure, dark energy that seemed to bend light around itself. G-Young S-Team crouched behind an abandoned vehicle and watched it move. The creature's form shifted constantly, sometimes solid, sometimes transparent, always searching for more energy to consume. It's beautiful, whispered Wu Jin the Nullvex. Even through his mechanical voice translator, the awe was clear. It's also in our way, Commander Taman replied. He raised his projectile rifle and aimed at the creature. Wait, Ji Young said, quietly. Let me try something first. She picked up a simple metal rod from the debris around them. It was just a piece of structural steel, nothing special or advanced. She stood up and walked toward the Vorthak. Corporal, what are you doing? Commander Taman hissed. Testing my theory. Ji Young replied. The Vorthak noticed her approach. The creature's form shifted and flowed as it tried to focus on her. But something was wrong. The being seemed unable to fully perceive her without energy signatures to lock. Onto G-Young raised the metal rod and struck at the creature's center mass. The simple steel bar passed through the dark energy form and hit something solid. The Vorthak flickered like a bad video signal and suddenly dispersed like smoke. The team stared in amazement. It worked, Bora the Kethmore said. Her 6 arms were trembling with excitement. The simple weapon disrupted whatever force held it together. Without energy fields to interact with, they can't maintain coherence in our reality, Ji Young explained. They're powerful, but they're also fragile. The team moved deeper into the colony. More Vorthak appeared, drawn by some unknown sense that intruders were present. Each time, the alien team members struggled with the concept of using primitive weapons. Commander Taman tried to fire his projectile rifle like an energy weapon, aiming carefully and trying to calculate trajectories. He missed repeatedly. Stop thinking like a Veltari, Ji Young told him. Don't calculate, react, point, and shoot. When he stopped trying to use mathematics and started trusting his instincts, his accuracy improved dramatically. Bo-Ra, the Kethmore, had the opposite problem. She kept trying to use her 6 arms to operate multiple weapons at once, the way she would with energy weapons that could be mentally controlled. One weapon at a time, Ji Young advised. These tools require physical coordination, not mental. Commands. The mechanical crossbow in Bora's hands became devastatingly effective once she focused her strength on a single target. Wu-Jin, the Nulvex, struggled most of all. His species had evolved beyond physical manipulation, relying on technology for everything. Operating mechanical devices was completely foreign to him. "I cannot do this," he said in frustration, after failing to operate a simple chemical launcher. "My species has not used primitive tools for thousands of years." "Then don't use them like your species," Ji Young replied. "Use them like a human. Like someone who grew up with simple tools and learned to make them extensions of your body." She spent precious minutes teaching the Nulvex how to hold and aim mechanical weapons. It was like teaching a professor of physics how to use a hammer. But slowly, Wu-Jin began to understand. The weapons weren't just tools. They were extensions of will and determination. As they fought their way toward the colony center, something unexpected began to happen. The alien team members started to change, not physically but mentally. They began thinking differently. When Commander Taemin encountered a Vorthak too large for his rifle, he didn't try to calculate a mathematical solution. Instead, he looked around for heavy objects to drop on it from above. It worked. When Bora faced multiple enemies, she didn't try to engage them all at once with superior firepower. Instead, she used cover and movement to fight them one at a time. It worked better than her advanced weapons ever had. When Wu Jin's chemical launcher ran out of ammunition, he didn't retreat to find more advanced tools. Instead, he used the empty launcher as a club and discovered that mechanical impact could disrupt Vorthak just as effectively as projectiles. "I am beginning to understand," Commander Taemin said during a brief rest. "Fighting without advanced technology is not a disadvantage. It is a different way of thinking." "Exactly," Ji Young replied. "Your tools were making you think in limited ways. Without them, you have to use everything around you as a potential weapon." The final challenge came at the colony's central power station. Hundreds of Vorthak had gathered there, feeding on the massive energy output. They had grown enormous, some the size of buildings, others stretching across entire city blocks. "How do we fight that many?" Bora asked. Ji Young studied the scene. "A direct assault would be suicide. Even with weapons the Vorthak couldn't absorb." "We don't fight them," she said finally. "We remove what they're feeding on." The power station was heavily automated, but it still had manual override controls for emergency situations. They were mechanical systems designed to work even if all electronics failed. Ji Young led the team through maintenance tunnels to reach the control room. The Vorthak couldn't follow them through the narrow spaces, and the lack of energy signatures in the tunnels made the team nearly invisible to the creatures. In the control room, Ji Young found what she was looking for: a manual shutdown system that would cut power to the entire colony using purely mechanical processes. "If we do this, every technological system in the colony will fail," Commander Taemin warned, "including life support for any remaining survivors." "The survivors are already hiding in areas without technology," Ji Young replied. "But the Vorthak depend on our energy to exist in our reality. Cut the power and they lose their anchor to our dimension." She pulled the manual shutdown lever. Throughout the colony, lights went out. Computers stopped humming. Energy barriers flickered and died. Every advanced system that had been built over decades of colonial development went silent. And the Vorthak began to fade. Without energy fields to maintain their presence in normal space, the creatures became less and less solid. Their forms wavered like heat mirages. Their movements became uncertain and confused. Within minutes, the massive creatures that had towered over the colony buildings were nothing more than wisps of shadow that the wind could blow away. "It's over," Wu Jin said in amazement. "They're gone." But Ji Young wasn't celebrating yet. Not gone. Returned to wherever they came from. They could come back if we restore power. "Then we don't restore power," Commander Taemin said simply. "We rebuild the colony using technology that doesn't create the energy signatures they need." The rescue of Tau 9 became the model for fighting the Vorthak throughout the galaxy. Fleets of ships equipped with kinetic weapons and mechanical systems. Soldiers trained to fight without energy shields or computer assistance. Colonies rebuilt using simple technology that the Vorthok couldn't use as anchors to reality. It wasn't easy. Many species struggled to abandon technologies they had used for thousands of years, but they learned. 6 months later, Ji Young stood in the same academy classroom where she had first explained human military philosophy, but now she wore the uniform of a galactic peacekeeper instructor, and the room was filled with students from every species in the coalition. The walls displayed images from the Vorthok campaign, fleets of ships built with mechanical systems, defeating energy beings that had seemed invincible. Soldiers from dozens of species working together using simple tools and basic tactics. Today we begin advanced tactical adaptation, Ji Young announced to her class. You have all learned to use your species' traditional weapons and technology. Now you will learn to fight like humans. A young Kethmore student named Jae-ho raised one of his 6 arms. Instructor, what is the most important lesson of human warfare? Ji Young smiled and picked up a simple metal rod from her desk. It was identical to the one she had used against her first Vorthok. The most important lesson is this, she said, holding up the rod. This is not a weapon, you are the weapon, this is just a tool. The warrior makes the tool effective, not the other way around. She looked around the classroom at faces from a dozen different worlds. Crystalline Veltari, insectoid Kethmore, gaseous Nulvex, and others. All of them had learned something that their species had forgotten over millennia of technological advancement. Your ancestors once fought with simple tools like this, she continued. They survived and thrived not because they had superior technology, but because they had superior determination. They adapted to any situation. They refused to give up. They found ways to turn disadvantages into advantages. A Veltari student, named Insu, flashed blue light patterns of curiosity. But surely advanced technology is still preferable when facing conventional enemies. Advanced technology is a tool, Ji Young replied. Sometimes it's the right tool, sometimes it isn't. A true warrior knows when to use advanced weapons and when to fight with nothing but determination and creativity. She walked to the window that looked out over the academy's training grounds. Below, students from different species practiced together. Veltari learning to use kinetic weapons, Kethmore training in stealth techniques, Nulvex practicing hand-to-hand combat. The Vorthok taught us something important, Ji Young said. No,